So for what reason did the Lord so first question is, what is the ultimate benefit for mankind? Second is, what is the essence of all scriptures? The third question, for what reason did the Lord take his birth from Devaki? So why did the Lord appear in this world? And why did he appear from the womb of Devaki? This is the entire 10th canto, right? Number 4, describe the wonderful deeds of the Lord when he assumed the forms of Brahma, Rudra, etc. for the purpose of creating, maintaining, and destroying the universe. So what is the purpose of all of the incarnations of the Lord? So we say that the Bhagavatam is a Krishna text, which is true, but the fact is that the first 9 cantos speak very little about Krishna. The first 9 cantos are all about the incarnations of the Lord and the devotees of the Lord, particularly. So they are describing the wonderful deeds of the Lord in his various forms, so that by the time we come to the 10th canto, we are convinced that Krishna is not just an ordinary child, but Krishna is the Supreme Personality of God. By understanding what his incarnation does, what his devotees do, in that way we gain an appreciation for who Krishna is. Shukadeva Goswami purposely did not describe Krishna's pastimes first. Otherwise, we would not be ready. We would not understand the depth and the import of his pastimes. Number 5, fully describe the activities of Lord Hari's incarnations within this universe. So I'm sorry, I jumped a little bit ahead of myself. Number 4 was about the Lord's creating, maintenance, and destruction. So Brahma, Shiva, and Vishnu, they are not, Brahma and Shiva, they are, Brahma is not God, but he's also the Satyavesh avatar. He's a person who's specifically been invested by the Lord for the purpose of creating. So therefore it's said that Krishna assumes the form of Brahma. He's not God. So why are we saying he assumes the form of Brahma? Because he invests within Brahma the power to create. Therefore Brahma is known as a Guna avatar, where he is there for the purpose of creating. He has this special power, and the Lord in some ways invests himself within Brahma. So for creation, he acts as Brahma. For destruction, he acts as Rudra, and for maintenance as Vishnu. So in the Srimad Bhagavatam, we will also find extensive discussions of creation and destruction in cantos 2 and 3. So that's in response to that. Question 5 is about the Lord's incarnations, which I already discussed. And question 6 is, where has religion taken shelter after Krishna has retired to his own abode? And in the quiz, we answered that question. Krishna has taken, invested himself in the Srimad Bhagavatam. And so the Srimad Bhagavatam itself establishes the importance of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And that's actually chapter 2. We'll see it shows the significance of hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, how important it is. One time, Gopi Paranadhana Prabhu, he's no longer on this planet, but he was in Vrindavan, and he was the editor and the translator. He was actually the translator of so many of Prabhupada's books, especially cantos 10, 11, and 12 that Srila Prabhupada lived. And he was in Vrindavan at the ashram in Govardhan, and just taking a walk or something. So I asked him, I said that after all of your studies, and he had translated the Shat Sandarbhas, the Chaitanya Charitamrita, he had worked on that also, so many books. I mean, his whole life was just books and translation. He was a Sanskrit scholar. So after all of these study, what is your takeaway? What is the most important literature? What would you tell a novice to read, like myself? And he said that that after studying so many of the Acharya's teachings and reading so many books, it was the Bhagavatam that was the most important book that all the Acharyas emphasized. Even more than the Chaitanya Charitamrita, even more than the Bhagavad Gita. These are in some ways very foundational books. they prepare us for the Bhagavatam. But the Bhagavatam is the ripened fruit. And he gave the example of Sanatana Goswami, he gave the example of Jiva Goswami, all the Goswamis in our tradition. They specifically mentioned Srimad Bhagavatam. And those of you who are doing Nectar of Devotion, you've already, I'm sure, come across that, where the 5 most potent items of devotional service are mentioned. And of that, one of them, in terms of reading, is specifically reading the Srimad Bhagavatam. So, Srila Prabhupada, in one purport, he says that by reading the Srimad Bhagavatam, we can understand every psychological situation in the world. So, in this world, there are so many psychological situations and so many difficulties that we face, but the Bhagavatam allows us to understand every situation, because it takes great devotees and he puts them in the same situations that we find ourselves and shows how they respond to those particular situations. So these are the 6 questions of the sages in chapter 1. And when you read through that chapter, you will see that they go and ask these 6 questions. Any question or comment on this point? Okay, wonderful. Okay, so,
Hare Krishna Prabhu, I have
yes.
this one. Can you hear me properly?
Yes, now I can hear you.
The one question, let me read this question. Describe the wonderful deed of the Lord when he assumed the form of Brahma and Rudra. So, it should be asked like this question. It seems like before that, Lord did not assume the form. Is that
yes, and see, that's why these are guna avatars. These are avatars in which Krishna manifests himself as the gunas at that time of creation. So we know that Brahma, in that particular form as Brahma, is not eternal. So when creation is necessary, the Lord manifests as the mode of passion that is personified by Lord Brahma, or in charge of the mode of passion for creation, and he manifests in the guna avatar of Brahma so that creation can take place. Vishnu is eternal because the Lord is always pure Shuddha Sattva, which is Lord Vishnu, which is the mode of Sattva, and Rudra is the mode of ignorance, in charge of the mode of ignorance, which means that the Lord manifests himself as Rudra for the purpose of destruction. So these are called guna avatars.
okay? So so what we call actual Krishna when he comes. So how can we compare Brahma and Rudras?
Nice question. Yes. So see, that's why there are different types of avatars, and these different avatars, they are the Lord manifesting in different forms and manifesting his energies to a certain extent. So for example, Srila Prabhupada is a Satyavesha avatar. He's a Satyavesha avatar. What this means is that when a living entity is very dear to the Lord and the Lord wants to empower him, then the Lord will manifest his power within that person for a certain duration of time, because the Lord wants to fulfill a purpose through that person for that particular period of time. And then once that purpose is done, the Lord may, withhold his power. Withhold meaning may draw back his power and not invest that power needed for that time period. So the Lord invests himself in his devotees like Brahma, like Srila Prabhupada, these special people who are not God. They're servants of God, but they are just like God because the Lord has invested his power in them due to their being the devotee of the Lord for that period of time. But still they're not God. Still, if someone went to Srila Prabhupada and said, how many grains of sand are in my hand? Prabhupada would not be able to tell them. Why? Because he has empowered Srila Prabhupada for the purpose that he wants him to fulfill, which is to give spiritual knowledge. He did not empower him to count the grains of sand in my hand. So therefore, he won't know that. But he's empowered him to preach Krishna consciousness all over the world. He's empowered him to give that perfect wisdom. And so this is what makes the unique position of Srila Prabhupada, that we have so many pure devotees in our tradition. But why Srila Prabhupada was unique? Because he was a pure devotee plus a Satyavesha avatar, meaning he was specifically empowered by the Lord to do this work. And like, we read that quote, Prabhupada would speak through him when he would write his books, or, he would particularly guide him specifically. So these are living beings that are pure devotees of the Lord, but plus more power. Krishna has empowered them. And therefore that's like an incarnation, but not really a full incarnation.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
That's a very nice question.
Okay, I'm a little nervous to ask this question.
Yes, go ahead.
I would like to hear your response. Why is it that it was arranged in the way that, what is the reason that Krishna gave us the first 9 to prepare us to understand his Leelas? Like, why? Why can we not understand without that preparation? Is it because worshiping the Lord's devotees is so essential and a part of worshiping Krishna? We just read previously in one of our readings for the Nectar of Devotion, Krishna says, you can't worship me unless you're a devotee of my devotees. Does it have something to do with that? Or please enlighten me with your wisdom.
No, you already have pretty much answered your question. We see that throughout the Bhagavatam, even in Krishna's Leelas, even in the Leelas of his incarnations, the focus is on the devotees of the Lord. The Bhagavatam actually wants to glorify the devotees. Therefore, it is called Bhagavata. Bhagavata, the Sanskrit Bhagavata actually means devotee. And Bhagavatam means the stories of the devotees. And for example, in the 9th canto, where we have the narration of the Ramayana is narrated in so many different ways in so many different literatures. The way the Srimad Bhagavatam narrates it is that it focuses it not on Lord Ram, but it focuses it on the devotees of Lord Ram and their feelings of separation for the Lord. Why? Because as readers, and that's why this is because the Bhagavatam is a teaching text. In the technical term, they call this a pedagogical text. Its main purpose is teaching. Why? Because what Lord Ram does is really not so relevant to us. I mean, he's God, we're clearly not. So what Lord Ram does is very interesting. Of course, it purifies our heart, but it's really not so important for us. But what's our interest is what his devotees are doing. What are the feelings of Mother Sita when she's in separation from Lord Ram? We should have those feelings also. What is the feeling of Lord Hanuman when he is trying to serve the Lord? We should have those feelings also. And how can we learn from these great devotees? So until we inculcate those devotional feelings within our heart, when we see Krishna, when we hear about Krishna, we may not feel that affection for Krishna that is natural to us. Just like when Krishna appeared 5,000 years ago on this planet, then so many people saw him. Duryodhana saw him, Dronacharya saw him, Kripacharya saw him, Bhishma saw him, the Pandavas saw him. They all saw him, and Krishna was in front of them face to face. But when Duryodhana saw him, he felt no love for Krishna. Why? Because he was envious of the Lord. So we come to this material world because we have some misgivings towards the Lord. We don't have love for the Lord. So when we see Krishna, we won't feel anything for the Lord, because in fact, he's in front of us. And so by the mercy of the devotees, by learning about the devotees and how they serve the Lord, we get those feelings for the Lord. And also because by understanding the incarnations of the Lord, we are understanding Krishna. And we're understanding Krishna's greatness in specific ways. So it's kind of like this, like Krishna is Akhila Rasamrita Sindhu. He's a Purna. All the rasas are within him. and it's almost like too much for us. But then when we understand Lord Krishna through Ram, then we understand this is who Krishna is as the ideal person, how noble Krishna is. So we're understanding that one particular quality of Krishna by appreciating the incarnation of the Lord. The same thing goes with as Vishnu, as Varahadev. So it's all Krishna. Krishna means his incarnations, his pastimes, his qualities, and that is the very teaching, that we have to understand everything in relationship with Krishna. So it's just taking us step by step so that we can then come to the platform of spontaneous love when we read the 10th canto. But of course, we can read it. That's why earlier we don't have to wait. That's why Prabhupada gave us the Krishna book. So through the lips of the devotees, we will get the right feeling. And in that way, we actually don't have to wait. We can start directly from the 10th canto by hearing it from Srila Prabhupada's lips. Thank you, Hare Krishna. Wonderful. So let us now begin reading chapter 2. We will dive into this chapter. Before we start reading, we always say one mantra. Please repeat after me. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
So chapter 2, text 1, divinity and divine service. So we'll start, we'll take turns reading the translations. This way we can get through many of them. I'll just read the verse for text 1, just so we get some Sanskrit. Vyasuvacha iti samprashna samhrishto vipranam romaharshani prati puja vachastesham pravaktum upachakrame. I'm sharing the screen. So that Anuradha Mataji, can you read the first translation?
Ugra Shravasha Sutta Goswami, the son of Romaharshana. Is that correct?
Chapter 2, text 1. I'm sorry, yeah, I was on the wrong one. Okay. Yes, please.
Romaharshana, being fully satisfied by the perfect questions of the Brahmanas, thanked them and thus attempted to reply.
Text 2. Mathura Priya Prabhu, you can read text.
Is it my turn, Prabhuji?
Yes.
Okay. Srila Sutta Goswami said, "Let me offer my respectful obeisances unto the great sage Goswami, who can enter the heart of all. When he went away to take the renounced order of life, sannyas, leaving home without undergoing reformation by the sacred thread or the ceremonies observed by the higher caste, his father Vyasadeva, fearing separation from him, cried out, 'O my son, indeed only trees which were observed in the same feeling of separation echoed in the response to bereaved father.'"
Deepak Prabhu, would you like to read this one, the third one?
Am I audible to
Yes.
all of us? So, Hare Krishna. Let me offer my respectful obeisances unto him, the spiritual master of all sages, the son of Vasudeva, who out of his great compassion for those gross materialists who struggle to cross over the darkest regions of material existence, spoke this most confidential supplement to the cream of Vedic knowledge after having personally assimilated it by experience.
Raj, you can read the next one.
Hare Krishna. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead, Narayana, unto Naranarayana, received the most supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author.
Venkatesh Prabhu, can you read the next one?
O sages, I have been justly questioned by you. Your questions are worthy because they relate to Lord Krishna and so are of relevance to the world's welfare. Only questions of this sort are capable of completely satisfying the self.
Brandy, would you like to read the next one?
Hare Krishna. The supreme occupation,
You're cutting out. Yeah, the internet in Vrindavan doesn't work sometimes. You're cutting out. I'll read it. The supreme occupation, dharma, for all humanity is that by which men can attain to loving devotional service unto the transcendent Lord. Such devotional service must be unmotivated and uninterrupted to completely satisfy the self. Devi Murthy, do you want to read the next one?
Yes. By rendering devotional service unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, one immediately acquires causeless knowledge and detachment from the world.
Okay, wonderful. And then I'll read one more, and then I think this will complete this section. The occupational activities a man performs according to his own position are only so much useless labor if they do not provoke the attraction for the message of the personality of Godhead. This is a very famous verse of the Srimad Bhagavatam, in which Krishna is telling us here, Sutta Goswami is telling the sages, what is the purpose of our labor? And here he's saying the occupational activities a person performs according to his own position are only so much useless labor if they do not provoke attraction for the message of the personality of Godhead. I'm going to go back now to text 3. Devi Murthy, your phone is going in and out. Yeah. Okay, so Anuradha Mataji, could you read the purport to text 3? This is the
Purport to text 3.
But,
Here we are. In this prayer, Srila Sutta Goswami practically summarizes the complete introduction of Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam is a natural supplementary commentary on the Vedanta Sutra. The Vedanta Sutras, or the Brahma Sutras, were compiled by Vyasadeva with a view to presenting just the cream of Vedic knowledge. Srimad Bhagavatam is a natural commentary on this cream. Srila Sukadeva Goswami was a thoroughly realized master on the Vedanta Sutra, and consequently, he also personally realized the commentary Srimad Bhagavatam. And just to show his boundless mercy upon bewildered materialistic men who want to cross completely over nescience, he recited for the first time this confidential knowledge. There is no point in arguing that a materialistic man can be happy. No materialistic creature, be he the great Brahma or an insignificant ant, can be happy. Everyone tries to make a permanent plan for happiness, but everyone is baffled by the laws of material nature. Therefore, the materialistic world is called the darkest region of God's creation. Yet, the unhappy materialist can get out of it simply by desiring to get out. Unfortunately, they are so foolish that they do not want to escape. Therefore, they are compared to the camel who relishes thorny twigs because he likes the taste of the twigs mixed with blood. He does not realize that it is his own blood and that his tongue is being cut by the thorns. Similarly to the materialist, his own blood is as sweet as honey. And although he is always harassed by his own material creations, he does not wish to escape. Such materialists are called karmis. Out of hundreds of thousands of karmis, only a few may feel tired of material engagement and desire to get out of the labyrinth. Such intelligent persons are called jnanis. The Vedanta Sutra is directed to such jnanis, but Srila Vyasadeva, being the incarnation of the Supreme Lord, could foresee the misuse of the Vedanta Sutra by unscrupulous men, and therefore he personally supplemented the Vedanta Sutra with the Bhagavad Puran. It is clearly said that this Bhagavatam is the original commentary on the Brahma Sutras. Srila Vyasadeva, who instructed the Bhagavatam to his own son, Srila Sukadeva Goswami, who was already at the liberated stage of transcendence. Srila Sukadeva realized it personally and then explained it. By the mercy of Srila Sukadeva, the Bhagavad Vedanta Sutta is available for all those sincere souls who want to get out of material existence. Srimad Bhagavatam is a one unrivaled commentary on the Vedanta Sutra. Sripad Shankaracharya intentionally did not touch it because he knew that the natural commentary would be difficult for him to surpass. He wrote Sharirikabhyas, and his so-called followers deprecated the Bhagavatam as some new presentation. One should not be misled by such propaganda directed against the Bhagavatam by the Mayavad schools. From this introductory shloka, the beginning student should know that Srimad Bhagavatam is the only transcendental literature meant for those who are Paramahansas and completely freed from the material disease called malice. The Mayavadis are envious of the personality of Godhead, despite Sripad Shankaracharya's admission that Narayan, the personality of Godhead, is above the material creation. But the envious Mayavadi cannot have access to the Bhagavatam. But those who are really anxious to get out of this material existence may take shelter of this Bhagavatam because it is uttered by the liberated Srila Sukadeva Goswami. It is the transcendental torchlight by which one can see perfectly the transcendental absolute truth realized as Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagwan.
Jai, thank you very much. It was a long purport. In this purport, Prabhupada is saying that this is the summary of the complete introduction to the Srimad Bhagavatam, and therefore it was a fit purport to read because it's summarizing it's giving us the executive summary. And the only point I want to make, and then we'll just open it to discussion, is that how every text has a context. In academics, they teach us this, that when you look at a text, a book, text means a book, or a narration, a speech. Every text has a context. So in the same way, the Srimad Bhagavatam also has a context. The Srimad Bhagavatam is a text that has a context. And what is that context? That is what's being described here. One thing, well, literarily speaking, the context of the Srimad Bhagavatam is the Vedanta Sutra, which is Veda Anta, means the end of the Vedas. It is the most sublime knowledge. It's meant to be the commentary on the ultimate knowledge. But on an even more deeper level, the context of the Srimad Bhagavatam is what? It's the material world. The context of the Bhagavatam is this material world. And this is why all of a sudden, in the second paragraph, Srila Prabhupada points out, he's so bold and strong here, he points out that no one can be happy in this material world, period. This is exactly what he says. There's no one can be happy in this material world. And so the context of the Bhagavatam is a world of unhappiness that he's assuring us that we cannot be happy in. And therefore, the Bhagavatam is so relevant. With that perception, with that recognition, not pessimism, but simply the recognition of the facts, that there's suffering, there's temporality, there's death, there's problems. Therefore, this literature is so relevant. It's not armchair philosophy. It is so important because this is actually the process of making every person very happy. This is the process of making us 100% happy. So if we were in a state of perfect happiness, maybe the Bhagavatam would not be so relevant. But the context is that look at where we are. So actually, when I read this verse for the first time, a long time ago, I remember actually distinctly, I was a teenager at that point, that when I read it, it gave me such a great sense of relief. I was like, oh, wow. It's no wonder that sometimes, or a lot of the times, I'm not happy. It's okay, because that's just the nature of the world. There's nothing wrong with me. There's nothing wrong with my life. It's actually realism. We tend to, part of our, 50% of our suffering is our regret. Oh, if only I'd done this, especially once we get older. Once we're younger, then we have, so much time to choose options. But now it's like, I look back and I think, well, if only I'd done this, if only I'd done that, and then I would have been so happy. And when we had gone on this vacation, if only I'd extended it to 2 weeks rather than 1 week, how nice that vacation would have been. So we get all these thoughts as though thinking that if I'd adjusted the situation, if I'd only done this or adjusted my situation, I would have been happy. But what Srila Prabhupada is telling us is that if we had adjusted it and done it a bit different, then there would have been a new problem, something different that we had not foreseen. If I was on vacation for 2 weeks rather than 1 week, then I would have been happier because I was on a longer vacation. But I didn't know that in that second week, there would have been some other problem. Maybe I might have met an alligator, and that might have messed up my vacation. So there will always be a problem. So adjusting our situations is not the solution. In fact, the solution is the recognition, the context, recognizing the context of the Bhagavatam, and then diving or relishing this Nigama Kalpatarur, this ripened fruit of Vedic literature. That is, in fact, the real solution. So I will stop here and see if there are any comments on this verse or the other verses that we read.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. I have a question on the last verse on the occupational activities. So I was wondering, is it related to the Varnashra Dharma that is mentioned in the Vedas, like Brahmanas has to do certain jobs, Sudras has to do certain jobs, like Vaishyas has to do certain jobs. Is it related to that? And if we are against that, say for an example, being administrator, I do business, or being a Brahmana, I do business, which is not meant to for my Varna Dharma. Is it a sin, or how can I still make it connected with the righteous way of serving Krishna?
Yes, Prabhu. I'm so glad you asked this question, because it's amazing how this happens when we read scripture. That the reason we have a question is because actually we're meant to have that question, or rather we have the question because that is that is what the text is actually talking about. And just a few verses before this, Srila Prabhupada speaks about Varna Ashram and has entire purport on what you're saying. So yes, indeed, this is speaking about that system of Varna Ashram, like you're saying, the different castes. It's speaking of that. And what it's telling us that the very purpose of this verse, which I put here on the screen, is that any occupation, whether in Varna Ashram or not, so it's related to Varna Ashram because Varna Ashram is an occupation that it has occupations in it. But any occupation, if it doesn't satisfy the Lord, then it is Shama Eva Hi Kevalam. It is useless. So therefore, the occupation that we do is not important, but the satisfaction of the Lord is important. And therefore, in fact, we should choose an occupation in which we know that we will be able to satisfy the Lord. Or whatever occupation we are in, our main purpose should be that am I satisfying the Lord? So this is speaking about all occupations, being teachers, doctors, lawyers, engineers. Our success will not be known on how good we do our work, on the fame that we generate, on the expertise that we have. Our success will be measured by how much the Lord is satisfied. Which means that if we do it expertly, in a nice way that is satisfying to the Lord, then the Lord will be pleased. So therefore, devotee is very eager to do his work very nicely, so that the Lord is satisfied, because the work that we do, the devotee does as a service to the Lord. But that's the key point. Just like in this world, we find so many people who are so effective, so influential, and so powerful. But the Bhagavatam is saying that if those effective people fail to satisfy the Lord, and they simply become, mesmerized by their own skill, like great musicians do, then what is the use? It is simply useless labor. So that is an important point here. Venkatesh Prabhu. Yes, Hari. Prabhuji, you can unmute yourself. Venkatesh.
Prabhuji, that is the case, then why did Krishna say in Bhagavad Gita that I created 4 varnas and 4 ashramas, like it is my creation? So, like it's like contradicting himself. No, Prabhuji, can you please explain more on this?
Yes, and that's why it's very important, because Varna Ashram is meant to help us. He says, according to guna and karma, according to our qualities and activities that we have, it's meant to help us find the ashram that is suitable to us, so that by performing our activities according to our own nature, we can satisfy the Lord. So the process of Varna Ashram is the process, because most of us are not on the Paramhansa level. We're not on the level where we can give up our activities in this world, not be doctors or farmers or lawyers, or do the duties of the different varnas and go to the forest. A Paramhansa is beyond Varna Ashram. So because we're not on that level, Krishna has given us the process of Varna Ashram so that we can perform our occupational duties to satisfy the Supreme Lord. But if we are a very good Brahmana and we've studied so many books, but if we do not satisfy the Lord, then that's the point this verse is making. Then that study will become useless. And that is explained by the example of Romaharshana, where Romaharshana is actually the father of Sutta Goswami, the person who's speaking right now. And he was a very great Brahmana who became very, very learned, and so learned that it got a little to his head. And so one time when he was speaking to the sages, then Lord Balaram arrived to the spot. He arrived in that assembly. And the moment Lord Balaram arrived, all the sages got up to greet him, because Balaram is Krishna. Krishna and Balaram are the same, just difference of color. So they could understand the Lord has come in our assembly. So they all got up. But Romaharshana was a very great Brahmana, very learned person, but he became proud and he did not stand up. He thought, why should I stand up? I'm the teacher right now. And so Lord Balaram saw this, and at that moment he killed him. So the point is that his occupational duty, although he was doing it so nicely, he was the teacher, he was the head of all of them. But because it did not please the Lord did not accept it. Of course, eventually he will accept it. But that's the whole teaching, that we have to try our best to please the Lord through our occupation. Raj, you had unmuted yourself. Did you have a question?
So, Prabhuji, if I understand correctly, then it is not about what we are doing. Whatever what we are doing, even though it is not in alignment with our Varnashrama Dharma, if we still do it for the pleasure of Lord, we can continue working on it, or there is no need to look for something that fits into our. Is that right? Is that what?
Well, true Varnashram Dharma actually means, so in some sense, I think the question itself is a little is assuming something. So your question is that if we don't do Varna Ashram, but we do what we want to do, and we satisfy the Lord through it, then is that okay? But see, real Varna Ashram is working according to our qualities. That is what we like to do. That is our own nature and our activities, what we actually do. So a person becomes a policeman because they like adventure and they're very courageous. And they become a policeman if they perform the activities of a policeman. So when the time comes, they don't hide behind the stairs. They stand up and they protect people. So if your qualities and your activities are in line, then you will do that which you like to do. But Varnashram is telling us that we have to do those things properly so that the Lord is pleased. Meaning that I can't just become a policeman because I like adventure, but then when there's a shooting in a school, I hide behind the stairs, as one policeman did. People criticized him for that. Why? Because he was not performing the duties of his Varna, and that did not please the Lord. So Krishna tells Arjuna in the Gita, and this is a very subtle but important one. Krishna tells Arjuna in the Gita that pure devotional service means doing what he wants you to do, not what you want to do. But the reality is that Krishna wants us to do, generally speaking, unless he tells us, he generally wants us to do what we also like to do, meaning what is our nature. But he wants us to do it for Krishna, because then we will do it well.
So what is our role in this, Prabhuji? If that is what Krishna wants us to do, and if we are just like in hands of Krishna and we are trying to do it in a way we want to do, then as a role, what I have, what should I do? Like the reason why I'm asking all these questions is like I'm having, I feel that I'm in a job where I don't like it. Not now. Sometime back, I was in a job where I felt that it is not what I wanted to do, but I had no option. But now I'm in a place where I feel that I want to do something and contribute for the spirituality. But how can I understand this? Am I just like not? It's nothing in my hands. I'm just being playing a role. What God wants, or I should equip myself. Where do I lie in this continuum?
Venkatesh Prabhu, would you like to answer the question?
Probably, like before answering that, reflection on your answer, how do we know that what we like to do is that's what Krishna wants us to do? Because in Arjuna's case, Arjuna didn't want to fight. He didn't want to fight because of various reasons. He liked to go renounce everything and go to a forest. But Krishna wanted him to fight.
Yes.
Because he was a Kshatriya, he wanted to follow his Varna of being a Kshatriya, so he wanted him to fight. But in our case, how do we know that what we like to do is what Krishna wants us to do?
Okay, very nice, very nice. So Krishna actually points this out to Arjuna. He says, because your nature, your guna, and your karma is that of a warrior, Your nature is to fight. And so therefore, he says, therefore, I want you to engage that nature in my service. I want you to fight, but fight for me. And he says, there's this verse in the 2nd chapter, he says, even if you abstain from fighting and you go to the forest, he says, guess what will happen? You'll start fighting. You'll go to the forest and you'll pick a fight with someone and start fighting, because you are the nature of a Kshatriya. It is your nature to protect. It is your nature to stand up for the right thing and to stand for, because you have that nature. It's like leaders. People are, they call them the A-type personality. You've probably heard this. If people are born with the nature of leadership, wherever they are, they might be in the prison among inmates, they'll be the leader of the prisoners. And people who don't have the nature of leadership, wherever they are, they'll be like, I'll just take the back seat. I'm very happy there. It's just their nature. So all Varna Ashram is saying is that we have to recognize our nature. And once we recognize our nature, then the Vedas are helping us on how we can use that in Krishna service. But Varna Ashram is very complex, it's very vast. And so how we use it in Krishna service is always slightly different. People are individuals. So we read the scriptures and we see the examples. This is how these people have these particular Varnas engaged in the Lord's service. So Raj, in your case, it's wonderful. Now that you've found what your nature is, you can engage it in the Lord's service.
And probably, I have one more thing on this one. I asked the same question with Jayadvit Maharaj during one of his lectures. How do we know that, what my nature is? This modern world is so complicated. So I may be doing something to support my family, and with no choice against the nature of my varna or my guna or my quality. But how do I know, what kind of guna and what kind of action I should do? Then Jayadvit Maharaj said that, not doing those things is an excuse, but you should approach a spiritual master to know what guna and what karma you should do.
Yes.
So the spiritual master will direct us. It's not like Maharaj was saying, you cannot find yourself, because with your intelligence, you're not able to find what guna you have and what action you should do. But your spiritual master should say what guna you have and or what action you should do.
That's a wonderful point. That's a very wonderful point. That the devotee takes the guidance of the scriptures and of the sadhu, specifically the spiritual master, on finding out what is the best role of activity for them. At the same time, we are on different, you could say, places and situations. At the same time, we find that Srila Prabhupada sometimes engaged devotees in activities that were not exactly their nature, but they were for the service of the Lord. Because a Vaishnava can serve the Lord in whatever way the Lord wants him to. And see, that's what I'm saying. We have a default, a general principle, and then we have specific principles also, exceptions also. So the spiritual master will see the disciple's nature and engage them according to that nature. And in that process, the disciple may also express to the spiritual master that I like to do certain things. This is what I like to do. Please engage me accordingly. And the spiritual master sometimes, due to a need for the practice of Krishna consciousness, for the propagation of Krishna consciousness, may tell a disciple, just do this because Krishna will be pleased. And that is acting on the level of a Vaishnava, which is, and of course we don't imitate that level, but an advanced Vaishnava can do anything for the Lord because they have actually attained the highest stage of perfection. To further clarify this, we'll just end with, I want to read this purport. I was actually thinking of reading this purport. I was deciding between 2 and 3, where Prabhupada exactly talks about our discussion, and he presents it so nicely. The whole purport is about Varna Ashram. And he tells us the balance between Varna Ashram and Vaishnavism. It's text 2122. So right here. And this is actually, after I read this verse, I sent it to a few people. This was very important. So this verse, it was Vyasadeva crying out for his son, who was a pure devotee from birth. And so then in the purport, Prabhupada talks about Varna Ashram in relation to being a Vaishnava. He says, the institution of Varna and Ashrama prescribes many regulated principles, regulated duties to be observed by its followers. Such duties enjoin that a candidate willing to study the Vedas must approach a bona fide spiritual master and request acceptance as his disciple. The sacred thread is the sign of those who are competent to study the Vedas from the Acharyas, or the bona fide spiritual master. Srila Shukadeva Goswami did not undergo such purificatory ceremonies because he was a liberated soul from his very birth. So he's saying that, for the normal case, we have to do it, but this is the case of Shukadeva Goswami. Generally, a man is born as an ordinary being, and by the purificatory process, he is born for the second time. That is Diksha. When he sees a new light and seeks direction for spiritual progress, he approaches a spiritual master for instruction in the Vedas. The spiritual master accepts only the sincere inquirer as his disciple and gives him the sacred thread. In this way, a man becomes twice born, or a Dvija. After qualifying as a Dvija, one may study the Vedas. And after becoming well versed in the Vedas, one becomes a Vipra. A Vipra, or a qualified Brahmana, thus realizes the absolute and makes further progress in spiritual life until he reaches the Vaishnava stage. Now, this is this. The Vaishnava stage is the postgraduate status of a Brahmana. A progressive Brahmana must necessarily become a Vaishnava, for a Vaishnava is a self-realized, learned Brahmana. So one quick comment here is that everyone who receives Diksha from a bona fide devotee of the Lord, which Srila Prabhupada will further explain, is a Brahmana. At the same time, someone may be a carpenter and not be reading books and having the Varna of a Brahmana. But because he knows Brahman, he is a Brahmana. Because he is a Vaishnava, Vaishnava means a devotee of the Lord, he is a Brahmana. At the same time, he may have his Varna, meaning the particular mode of action that he's working in. As a farmer, he's a Vaishya, and like this. So it's actually said that the devotee has two Varnas. The devotee is always a Brahmana because he knows Brahman, but then he's also acting in other ways for his daily maintenance, for example. Srila Shukadeva Goswami was a Vaishnava from the beginning. Therefore, there was no need for him to undergo all the processes of the Varnashram institution. Ultimately, the aim of Varnashram Dharma is to turn a crude man into a pure devotee of the Lord, or Vaishnava. So the purpose of Varnashram is to gradually, through our own work, purify our existence. Anyone, therefore, who becomes a Vaishnava accepted by the first class Vaishnava, or Uttamadhikari Vaishnava, is already considered a Brahmana, regardless of his birth or past deeds. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu accepted this principle and recognized Srila Haridas Thakur as the Acharya of the Holy Name, although Haridas Thakur appeared in a Mohammedan family. In conclusion, Srila Shukadeva Goswami was born a Vaishnava, and therefore Brahmanism was included in him. He did not have to undergo any ceremonies. Any low-born person, be a Kirata, Huna, Andhra, Pulinda, Pulkasha, Abhira, Shumba, Yavana, Khasa, or even lower, can be delivered to the highest transcendental position by the mercy of Vaishnavas. Srila Shukadeva Goswami was a spiritual master of Srila Suta Goswami, who therefore offers his respectful obeisances unto Srila Shukadeva Goswami before he begins his answers to the questions of the sages at Naimisharanya. So just to conclude, we may be working at the supermarket. Of course, we don't want to deal with meat, but meaning some sort of, we may be, just a worker in a retail store. But if we are accepted by the pure devotee of the Lord, and we are a Vaishnava, then that person is even higher than a Brahmana. That person is pleasing the Lord because they've surrendered their mind, body, and words unto the Lord. And that person is is the qualities of Brahmanism are included in him. So that is the ultimate point of Krishna consciousness. At the same time, the scriptures, realizing that not everyone is a pure devotee of the Lord, is giving us specific instructions on how we can lead a life that will gradually help us, through our occupation, help us come to the Supreme Lord.
Prabhu, my question here is, in this context, Prabhupada is talking about Srila Sukadeva Goswami, who is in the Paramahamsa level already when he was born. So taking that into account for our life, it's not really, it's that, I don't know how that will apply to our life because we are not at the level of Sukadeva Goswami. So the context here is Sukadeva Goswami. But going back to the example you gave, working in a supermarket, there was a lecture by Srila Prabhupada in the city of Hyderabad in India. After the lecture, the man approached Srila Prabhupada and said, hey, I'm a butcher by profession right now. And after listening to your lecture, I think that I'm doing the wrong things, but I have a family to support. What should I do? And Prabhupada replied that you should not change the job overnight, but keep looking for a different job and gradually switch over your job from being a butcher to some other job which suits you.
Yes.
But I don't recommend you to being a butcher. But if you think that it's wrong, and if you can find some other job, then please switch over to the job. And Prabhupada did not recommend you stay a butcher and you practice Krishna consciousness.
Yes.
Because we are very ordinary persons, and we cannot compare ourselves to Sukadeva Goswami and say that we achieved a Vaishnava stage or something like that. Is that my understanding correct, Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhu. And that being a butcher is sinful activity, and therefore Prabhupada wanted him to give up that. But many devotees are taxi drivers. Jayananda Prabhu was a taxi driver. Many devotees are like yourself, they're doctors, they're physicians. Many devotees are, so they have so many different occupations. And so Varnashram is there to help us engage our occupation in the Lord's service to please the Lord. Occupations that we are obliged in some ways to do. And regarding this point, it's important also that although the context here, this is why it was such a significant purport, this one. Although the context is Shukadeva Goswami, in the purport, Prabhupada here is saying anyone therefore who becomes a Vaishnava, and he's not saying a first-class Vaishnava, he says who becomes a Vaishnava accepted by the first-class Vaishnava, or Uttamadhikari, meaning that the spiritual master is an Uttamadhikari, is already considered a Brahmana, regardless of his birth or past deeds. So our work may be of a Shudra, we may be a taxi driver. But if we take shelter of a pure devotee of the Lord, and we accept, their shelter, then he's saying anyone can rise to the platform of a Brahmana. So this is actually a big topic of discussion, and many devotees in our movement, senior devotees in our movement, they say therefore the devotee is a Vaishnava, that is also a Brahmana, and his mode of work may also be of a Shudra, because that's just his consciousness. But that's not so important. It doesn't matter what the mode of work is, because that is temporary, ultimately. But what's most important is if we have accepted the Lord as our become a Vaishnava.
Yes, Prabhuji, but here Prabhupada says that when you get accepted by a spiritual master or Uttamadhikari, you become a Brahmana, which stays within the Varnashrama,
Yes.
Circles. Prabhupada did not say that accepted by a Uttamadhikari, you become a Vaishnava.
Yes.
So that means, but he further down he explains how Sukadeva Goswami is a born Vaishnava. So there's a difference between a Vaishnava stage and a Brahmin stage. The Brahmin stage still stays in the Varnashrama Dharma.
Yes.
So that's how we have to understand this, Prabhuji?
What do you suggest, Prabhu? I didn't follow exactly.
Probably like here, Prabhupada says that once accepted by a spiritual master, you become a Brahmana and not Vaishnava.
No, you become a Vaishnava. A Vaishnava includes a Brahmana.
No, Prabhuji, here Prabhupada says you become a Brahmana, not a Vaishnava.
So he says, anyone therefore who becomes a Vaishnava, accepted by the first class Vaishnava or Uttamadhikari Vaishnava, is already considered a Brahmana, regardless of his birth or past deeds.
Okay, so once you get accepted by a spiritual master, you become a Vaishnava. Is that correct, Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhu.
Okay. Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you. Yes, very nice. Someone has another question. Okay, so Raj, go ahead. You want to share something?
No, Prabhuji, I was just, I understood it now, and I am very thankful for this conversation. You know, it was very, very assuring on the path which I'm planning to go. Hare Krishna.
Yes. Yeah, and see, in the modern world, we are aspiring. We are very trying hard to follow Varnashram. But because of our unfortunate situation, we may not be able to, or we may be able to a certain extent. But whatever our situation is, we can always become a devotee. We can always chant our rounds. We can always preach. We can always serve Krishna. So that is the first thing. First thing is that we must become a devotee, and then as we are becoming a devotee, then we can start seeing, okay, now I have to work on the details. My work is here, but how can I adjust my work so it's more in line with Krishna consciousness? How can I adjust it? So that is the.
And Prabhu, I have one more question here.
Yes.
Like, if this is what Prabhupada wanted us to do, then why did he stress so much on Varnashram Dharma? And it was famously quoted that Prabhupada said that 50% of my work is not done, which is Varnashram Dharma.
Yes. Yes.
And if Prabhupada thinks that everyone becomes initiated by Uttamadhikari, then he's a Vaishnava, then why would Prabhupada say that?
No, that's why we want to do that. We completely want to. We should aspire to do Varnashram. It's just that the question is how to do it, and so like the best thing is to try to do it perfectly and do it really well. It's just that some of us are working, we have jobs, and so we try as much as possible, but we're in a society that does not support it. But 100% we should try to apply Varnashram as far as possible, as far as we can do.
Okay, thank you, Prabhu. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other? We're already at 12:30, an hour and a half, so we went over. It was a very nice discussion, very wonderful conversation.
Yeah, if there is no question, then we can thank Prabhuji by saying
Thank you. No need for this. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much.
Haribo, Haribo.
Haribo, Haribo, Haribo.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Haribol. Yes. Have a very wonderful week, and we will meet very soon.
Haribo.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.